Personally, I felt better. I mean, that's a very blanket phrase, I know, but personally, I felt better. I probably felt happier as well.
Yeah.
So more energy throughout the day, better sleep at night. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out if you get more sleep and you have more energy, you're probably going to be a perkier person, more positive as well. So from a personal and professional point of view, because they mesh pretty closely in my life because me and my wife work together, so there's not really much of a boundary. Yeah, so we work together. I'm actually in our office at the moment. And that's really, it's great. The freedom it affords me to be here for my daughter and to always be around home, which is amazing. And I wouldn't change it for the world from that point of view. Very hard when you're constantly with the same person day in, day out. And we live in a little village. We're not in a town. And it's quite hard from that point of view. So you're in each other's pockets the entire time. So that is a challenge. But again, that's a challenge that happens with a lot of people who work from home. So when we were working together, I guess the impact of the better sleep, focusing more on my nutrition, more on movement, probably made me an easier person to work with, if I'm honest. I was far more creative. I wasn't so sluggish throughout the day. We could have super productive meetings. But, you can't argue with the effects of all these things. I was more awake, more engaged. I think going into the process of having a child as well, which is an enormous period in anyone's life, male or female, I think it gave me a really good foundation to be a better parent and to be there more for Holly throughout the pregnancy period, which is such a huge strain on a woman physically and mentally. And it was for Holly. Holly had very troubling labor. It was really, really hard. And I think she had, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, like a degree of PTSD following that. So I think the work that we put in and the things that I learned around nutrition, sleep, all the stuff we've just spoken about had a massive effect on how much I could be there mentally and physically for Holly throughout that process as well. And I like to think she's noticed that and is probably but people who are building a family and going through the challenges of building a family from a mental standpoint, I think the work that we put in had real effects on me in a positive way, going into the process of building a family, raising a child, for all the stuff we've spoken about before. And so I would recommend this to anyone I know who's got a first, second, third, fourth child on the way and who potentially doesn't really know how to deal with that.
Hey guys, Luke Maslin here, founder of Total Performance Living and creator of the Better Man Blueprint. And today I've got Stu Gordon here to talk about his experience in the Peak Performer one-on-one coaching program. Stu, how are you going?
Going well, mate. How are you?
Very well.
Very different times where we are. It's
exactly. Yeah.
Blue sunny day here and probably midnight where you are.
Yeah, bit different. So tell us a bit about yourself, Stu.
So, God, how long have you got? People might get bored.
Give me
I'm a quick bio, my elevator pitch to myself, basically.
Yeah.
I'm 34. Probably look a lot older considering I lost all my hair about a month ago, probably due to the stress of COVID. 34. I live in England, in a little village just outside Oxford. I used to live in London, worked for years, working in the corporate world. Actually, it's where we met, working recruitment for Robert Walters, and never really enjoyed it very much, and moved out to rural Oxfordshire when I had a close family death, sadly. And that was 4 years ago. And ever since then, I've worked with my wife, which has its pluses and minuses. And we run a business called Pilates PT, which is a Pilates based business here in the UK. And we have studios and online programs. We got married a couple of years ago, and 18 months ago, we had our first child, a little girl, Freya.
Brilliant.
And so, we live out here in the countryside and trying to keep our head above water during the whole COVID pandemic, just about doing that. And we worked together relatively recently. And is that elevator enough for you? Or
yeah, that's it. You're sold. You've been sold. So tell us a little bit about where your health was at before we started working together.
So I think, so before we started working together, it was just a bit after my mum who died. It was just a bit after my mum had died. When that happened, I left Robert Walters almost overnight. I think I was quite unhappy working there, I always wanted to kind of escape that corporate world, and it was causing a lot of mental stress for me, which has had its ramifications mentally and physically on my appearance and my mind. And so I think when Mum died, that night I found out, I decided straight away, said, I'm never going back to London ever again. And I never did. I left the job and then moved out here to the countryside. And I think that all happened so quickly. And so from a mental standpoint, just dealing mentally with what had happened and how I felt about it had a real big effect on my health. And so this is a long way around of answering a question, I get.
Not at all.
But before we started working together, my stress was through the roof. I had pretty severe anxiety. My weight wasn't great. I didn't feel good physically. And I think I wouldn't say disordered eating, far from it, in fact. But I had no real perception of how I should eat my food, how I should manage my sleep. I wasn't sleeping particularly well. Even when I had 8 hours sleep, I was still feeling kind of pretty awful every day. Mm-hmm. And so I think just from a holistic well-being perspective, I just wasn't in a particularly good place. And I think the career situation combined with Mum's death was a bit of a catalyst around a lot of those areas. And so I guess, before we started working together, that's a kind of brief snapshot of where I was.
Yeah. And what would you say was the main thing holding you back from joining the coaching program and working together?
Well, for me, I actually had, so I'll answer it in a roundabout way. So I'm a fairly open guy. I generally do speak to people about how I'm feeling. I don't tend to keep much back. I wouldn't say I'm an open book as such, but I'm not your typical bloke who doesn't ever talk about how he feels. So I had therapy in London whilst working at Walters, because I was really pretty low, and I was going once a week to a therapist just to kind of get stuff off my chest, which really helped. So coming around to before we started working together, I guess one thing that had sat with me is I hadn't been kind of in therapy for a year or two at that point, and I was probably quite nervous to open up to someone someone that I knew fairly well, and I think that probably held me back slightly, because we knew each other on a friendship level, and so letting you into my anxieties, my worries, my deepest, shortcomings, in my opinion, probably was mentally a challenge for me, or a little hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
So that probably there was two kind of biggest things. There was also the cost thing as well, because I'd never invested in having a coach before, or someone coaching me how to do these things. And it's so hard when you're paying towards something that you have never done before. But I would say probably the biggest one was working with someone. Yes, I knew you, but whether I knew you or not, or working with someone who's at a pretty similar stage of life to me, age-wise, career-wise, and letting you into my inner demons in a way, or my worries. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier around, it was at a time when you were about to have a baby, or had recently been married. Was there anything that was holding you back there, do you think, in terms of timing wise?
I mean, my life seems to be 100 miles an hour all the time. I never seem to have time to do anything, if I'm honest. Like it's being in your 30s as a bloke, especially in this digital age where you're pulled in every direction, is hard. And on top of that, we've moved out here, dealing with personal circumstances around my family. I think I was just about to get married actually to Holly when we started working together. Which from a timings point of view takes a lot of time up, which is slightly ridiculous. And then we had Freya. Well, we didn't know she was going to be called Freya at the time, but baby in our mind at the moment. I think knowing that I was going to then be investing an hour or two per week, which doesn't sound much to a lot of people, but when you're in my opinion, in the situation I was in, that's actually quite a lot of premium time. I would agree that was definitely a consideration.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And tell us a bit about how the problems you mentioned earlier before we started working together were actually impacting your life.
I think probably I didn't realize the full extent of how they impacted my life really until we started working together. But, I did recognize that they were impacting my life, because I'm quite a big believer in the fact that you shouldn't ever enter into a professional relationship like we were, or maybe even going to therapy or getting personal help until you personally realize you have a problem. I've known plenty of people, family members and not, who I recognize could really benefit from, be it therapy or coaching, but don't realize it themselves. But for me, I think I realized that all of the stuff I spoke about earlier on was impacting me. So if you look at kind of the anxiety piece, I had severe anxiety career-wise, around the fact that I worked for years in a salaried job, and I'd left that salaried job overnight for the uncertainty of working with my wife on a business. So what we brought in literally put food on the table and paid our mortgage, and it was the anxiety was holding me back massively from taking action in that career space. And so, it wasn't just anxiety, it was a lot of mental health. Sorry, not a lot of mental health, but a lot of mental obstacles that I faced in terms of self-confidence, anxiety, dare I say it, kind of mild depression as well, which was holding me back from a career point of view. And I recognized that. For me, I probably didn't realize on the food part and kind of the way I was eating, how I was eating, kind of what I was putting in my body. I probably didn't realize that to the full extent that I realized working through you. But I did realize I didn't feel great. I mean, I've never actually been the rich irony of this is I work in a business which is all about exercise and Pilates and the benefits of moving your body. But I've never been a humongous advocate. Not advocate, it's probably the wrong word. I've never really been humongously into exercise myself. And I didn't really know where to start. In the day and age we live in, you go on Instagram, Facebook, there's 4 billion people at any one point saying, this is what you need to do, that is what you need to do. And so I felt the barrier to entry in terms of, I just want to start moving my body a bit more in the right way. I found the barrier to entry actually pretty high. So physically, I didn't feel great because I was carrying a bit more weight, which necessarily isn't. I'm not a particularly vain person, but I like my clothes to fit well, and who doesn't like to look good in the mirror? And I didn't look good in the mirror. My clothes didn't fit well, so physically I wasn't in a particularly good way, and I wasn't. I remember a big thing we worked on was optimizing my sleep, for example, and I just wasn't sleeping well. I remember our initial conversations. I was saying, Luke, man, I'm sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night, every night, which a lot of people would kill for. And I'm waking up feeling sluggish and horrible during the day. What's wrong? Yeah. And so I did realize that was a problem as well. So I think I was probably just a bottleneck on quite a lot of those points.
Yeah. Okay. And what were you mentioned earlier, but what was like the biggest fear or concern or you had around actually reaching out for help and engaging a coach, investing in a coach and coming into the program?
Do you mean my biggest hold up in doing
your fear or concern? You mentioned something earlier, but was there anything beyond that as well?
Maybe, I guess it could be a degree of embarrassment. Maybe I don't think thinking back on it, I don't think I had much to be embarrassed about, but opening myself out as a person, and really laying the cards on the table with you. I think that was quite a hold up for me. I think that was a worry about letting someone else into into my worries, I guess. Does that kind of answer the question? That's probably my biggest hold up, I'd say.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And reflecting on all the things that we worked on during the program, what would you say are the 3 things that you learned that had the biggest impact on your life?
The 3 things I learned. So I'd say how I consume food is actually a massive one. And I'll summarize them and kind of go into them in a bit more depth. Probably how I consume food and how I feel my body is actually quite a big piece that we worked on. Because it was all over the place. I was snacking on food. I wasn't eating the right food at the right time. And I wasn't doing this with regards to having a particular end goal. I wasn't saying, Luke, I want to have a 6-pack. Luke, I want to have enormous hypertrophy of my muscles. It's just, let's get my food back to the right level. That was probably a big thing for me. The sleep part actually was really big, and is still something which I think about every single day, every night when I go to bed, every evening when I make my food, wake up in the morning. That had a real big impact. And I'd say just around moving my body more and doing the right form of movement. I'd say those 3 areas, yes, they're very broad areas I get, but they had a big impact on my life.
And what results have you seen from actually implementing on those areas that you spoke about there?
So let's go through them from the top. So from the food point of view, and there's no point kind of going into depth around what we agreed, but it was real small adjustments. Like, and correct me if I've got any of this wrong. Like one thing that I was doing, I was having really small breakfasts. Then I might have lunch, I might not have lunch. I'll probably snack a lot quite in between, potentially on sugary foods. And I'd have a massive dinner about 9 p.m. at night. So that was kind of a typical day in my life pre-working with you. And then realizing that actually something I think about every single day, I think the phrase was eat like a king, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. And just making that little flip, so flipping my day around, so having a nice big, I guess, dinner at the start of the day, or a super bolognese, perhaps. At the start. So having a big dinner at the start of the day, and then progressively lowering the amounts I'm eating and eating earlier in the evening had a massive impact just on energy levels as well, and everything kind of feeds into everything else. So
what were the results? What were the impacts of those changes in nutrition then, do you think?
Higher energy throughout the day, for sure. And that came from the fact that I was fueling my body with good, nutritious food first thing in the morning, and not just a small amount of it, a larger amount of it. Because something I just hadn't thought about before we worked together, which you made very clear, and I can't believe I hadn't thought about, was why are you eating a massive dinner at the end of the day when you're about to go to sleep? Why not put that energy earlier on in the day? So I did that. So massive amount more energy throughout the day, and much better sleep. And I know I keep coming back to the sleep thing, but eating earlier in the night and eating a smaller amount had a massive effect. It meant that my body wasn't processing a massive dinner post 9 p.m. when I'm going to bed, and it enabled me to sleep better and sleep with more quality as well. And to be perfectly honest with you, just from a physical standpoint as well, I just feel so much better before. I remember before we started working together, I was probably about 14 and a half stone. And I'm like, I'm about 5'9". That's not a good shape. That's not a good, healthy kind of position to be in. Mm-hmm. And I think since working with you, I was probably consuming slightly less calories, but I was eating in a way that suited my body far more. And so the weight came off even without doing 15 HIIT classes a day. You know, we were doing pretty simple exercises, simple compound movements. And just through how I ate from a physical standpoint as well, I felt better naked, basically.
Yeah, beautiful. And the things you mentioned that you got there at the nutrition, the movement, the sleep, how did they impact you, or what results did you see maybe outside of the physical piece, whether it be personally or professionally? Did you see any impact there?
Personally, I felt better. I mean, that's a very blanket phrase, I know, but personally, I felt better. I probably felt happier as well.
Yeah.
So more energy throughout the day, better sleep at night. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out if you get more sleep and you have more energy, you're probably going to be a perkier person, more positive as well. So from a personal and professional point of view, because they mesh pretty closely in my life because me and my wife work together. So there's not really
Tell us
much
a
of a
bit about that.
boundary. Yeah, so we work together. I'm actually in our office at the moment. And that's really, it's great. The freedom it affords me to be here for my daughter and to always be around home, which is amazing. And I wouldn't change it for the world from that point of view. Very hard when you're constantly with the same person day in, day out. And we live in a little village. We're not in a town. And it's quite hard from that point of view. So you're in each other's pockets the entire time. So that is a challenge. But again, that's a challenge that happens with a lot of people who work from home. So when we were working together, I guess the impact of the better sleep, focusing more on my nutrition, more on movement, probably made me an easier person to work with, if I'm honest. I was far more creative. I wasn't so sluggish throughout the day. We could have super productive meetings. And actually, I've just remembered one thing we also worked on as well. Is actually, I can thank you for my setup right now. Is thinking about my work setup as well, because that is completely intermingled with my professional life. Going from working on my dining room table with my arms up like that on a keyboard, leaning back on a big old seat, to now, I don't know if you can see, working on one of these stand-up. Well, this is actually on one of those stand-up desks. Actually, my stand-up desk is over there. And feeling a lot more set up from a physical standpoint throughout the day as well. So it's had a real big effect on that as well. So I feel great.
And what about in terms of, did you notice any impact on the relationship with your partner, Holly, from the work?
Yeah, I think it kind of feeds into what I said before. It probably made me an easier person to be around. I think she took a while to adjust to the changing of my eating habits. And it took her a while, because she wasn't working with you, to convince her that having a bolognese or a chili at 7 o'clock in the morning was normal. But, you can't argue with the effects of all these things. I was more awake, more engaged. I think going into the process of having a child as well, which is an enormous period in anyone's life, male or female, I think it gave me a really good foundation to be a better parent and to be there more for Holly throughout the pregnancy period, which is such a huge strain on a woman physically and mentally. And it was for Holly. Holly had very troubling labor. It was really, really hard. And I think she had, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, like a degree of PTSD following that. So I think the work that we put in and the things that I learned around nutrition, sleep, all the stuff we've just spoken about, had a massive effect on how much I could be there mentally and physically for Holly throughout that process as well. And I like to think she's noticed that and is probably happier as a result. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's good, really good insight from you there for sure. If you're thinking about your experience in working together in the program, who would you recommend this coaching to? What type of men or man out there?
Well, I'm a big believer in coaching or support, professionally or personally, period. I think every man going through, I always think that everyone you meet, especially men, will have their own challenges in their life that you don't see. Everyone's battling their own battles mentally, physically, even if you have no idea. So broadly speaking, I think anyone could benefit from it. I really do, because if we laser in, like, I remember a lot of stuff that you said to me is a really quick way of boosting your health in the short term is, for example, getting a really bloody good water filter. That's been a massive impact in my life. I'm not polluting my body with all these fluorides and these horrible chemicals. I still do that every single day. Everyone can benefit from that. But overall, what type of men, well, I would say men could benefit from this would be people who are in their early 30s, early to mid 30s, perhaps thinking about building a family. I'd say also people who were in my situation pre us working together. So maybe people who are struggling from a career perspective, people who feel like they should be doing the big corporate job, earning all the money, but actually hate it and are very, very low. I actually think with retrospect, it would have been fantastic if we'd worked together when I was probably still at Robert Walters. That could have probably helped me even more. So maybe men who are in that situation. But people who are building a family and going through the challenges of building a family from a mental standpoint, I think the work that we put in had real effects on me in a positive way. Going into the process of building a family, raising a child, for all the stuff we've spoken about before. And so I would recommend this to anyone I know who's got a first, second, third, fourth child on the way and who potentially doesn't really know how to deal with that.
Yeah. And what would you say, are there any particular characteristics you think are important for a man coming into the program to get the most out of it?
Yeah, just be prepared to lay it all on the table. Leave your embarrassment or pride at the door. I really believe that. I believe we kind of entered an age now of that kind of stalwart, kind of strong exterior for men is being broken down. If I knew anyone who was entering a program with you, I'd say, listen, like if you're embarrassed about something, leave it at the door. If you're proud about something, leave it at the door. Tell Luke how you feel about your physical appearance, your sex life, whatever it may be. Because if you are open, you are going to get far better results. And so that would be my main piece of advice to anyone working with you or anyone similar is leave your pride at the door, lay it on the table, because if you lay it on where you're at from a mental and physical standpoint, you're going to reap the rewards far quicker and better.
Right. And finally, what would you say to any man watching this right now who's thinking about getting a coach, but they're not sure if it's right for them, they're not sure if it's going to work for them? What would you say to that man?
I'd say just reach out. I really would. I think it's something I struggled with quite a bit, is just indecision. And I think a lot of people are in the position right now where there's a lot of stuff available to them. And that can actually create inaction. So I'd say if you are watching this and you're a bloke who can identify with anything that I have said, which I'd imagine there'll be a fair few people, just get in touch with Luke. Honestly, like it was awesome, the stuff we worked on. And I still carry every single thing forward into what I do on a daily basis today. Every single thing. I mean, it's 11:30 in the morning here, and like I've already had a massive breakfast. I've used my water filter every day. I have my blue blocking glasses that help my sleep optimize.
Yeah.
Like take action now and just get in touch, and you won't regret it. Like, I don't know, maybe that's a bit wishy-washy, but I would say if you're thinking about it, just reach out. It doesn't cost you anything to reach out and just say, hey, these are my problems. Can you help me? Does that kind of answer the question? I mean, that's probably what I would say if even if we weren't doing this interview. And my best mate came to me and said, hey, Stu, I can see you really benefit from that. I'm feeling super anxious going into parenting. I physically feel terrible. I don't sleep well. Like, I know you work with that guy, Luke. What would you say? I would always say get in touch. Yeah. Just reach out, have a chat, and see whether you can help, because you really helped me.
Brilliant. Awesome to hear. Well, thanks a lot, Stu. I really appreciate your insight. Is there anything that you'd leave us with before we wrap it up here?
I would always say it's something I've always said to everyone I've ever known, from a friend's point of view. If I ever see anyone struggling, even whether they realize it or not, just don't struggle alone. Don't suffer in silence, because everyone has a battle they're facing, mentally, physically, whatever it may be. I am a massive, massive believer in reaching out for help. And I think from my point of view, sorry, it's a very long way of answering a question. Investing in yourself financially and through programs such as this are so important. They may feel challenging from a financial perspective in the short term, but the benefits you're going to reap in the long term are huge. So that would be probably my biggest piece of advice. Don't be put off by the fact it's something completely new. Open up and try it out and see whether it works for you.
Right. Sage advice, my man, sage advice, and appreciate you being so open and honest in this conversation. And no doubt people watching this are going to get a lot out of it, both in terms of your own experience and what they can potentially get out of it themselves. So thank you again, really appreciate it. And as Stu said there, his number one piece of advice was take action. Reach out, ask for help. And the first part about doing that, if you are watching this here, if it does interest you, if you think it could be for you, I offer you the opportunity to schedule a free, complimentary Total Performance Pit Stop Clarity call with me. It's an initial conversation. There's no risk around it. There's no expectation. It's an opportunity for you to basically do three things: get clear on what you're looking for, get clear on how you're going to get there, and see if and how I could be the person that might be able to help you do that. The reason why I do it complimentary is because I know for guys it's challenging to reach out, as Stu said and identified here. So having that opportunity to have the initial conversation, get clear on if and how I can help. If I can, great, we can talk about what they'll look like. And even if not, you're still going to walk away from that conversation with an immense amount of value in terms of what a path forward could look like for you and how you can actually get from where you are now to where you want to go. So if you are interested, if this has sparked something in you, get in touch. There's a link below in this video to schedule one of those Total Performance Pit Stop Clarity calls with me. Let's get on, let's have a chat, let's see if I can help, and we'll take it from there. So thanks again, Stu. Really appreciate your time. And for everyone else out there, look forward to speaking with you soon. This is Luke Maslin from Total Performance Living, and I'll speak to you soon.
See ya.
Thanks, Stu.
You're welcome. Thank you a lot.